one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Some scattered light snow in the region, minus 15 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Board of Health in Ottawa heard the rate of third doses of COVID vaccine sits at 59%. One way to encourage a boost in that number is to require 3 shots anywhere the provincial passport has to be used. Ottawa's top doctor will write the Premier with that request, but Doug Ford has already rejected the idea just last week. City News reporter Prushka Gobelkista tells us this morning Dr. Vera Etches says we all have a part to play to combat this wave of COVID.
Dr. Vera Etches is urging residents to get vaccinated against COVID-19. This, she says, will help decrease hospitalizations. And she explains that those who are most at risk include people who are not yet vaccinated.
Some individuals may still require hospital care. Many who are unvaccinated and contract COVID-19, some vaccinated individuals, and especially people over age 60. Our healthcare system cannot withstand the pressure of too many people acquiring COVID-19 at the same time.
Now, even as many people are getting their COVID-19 vaccine, she says we shouldn't let our guard down just yet. Practicing those COVID-19 health measures are still the best way forward. Pirushka Gopal-Kista, City News.
Now, Board of Health Chair Keith Eglai coming up with more on this subject on the Rob Snow Show this morning. City News time 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Cloudy for the afternoon, turning colder. The high just minus 11, a gusty northwest wind. Tonight, mainly clear and cold, will drop to minus 27, but it'll feel like minus 38 with the wind. For today, the high minus 11.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls with some scattered light snow still, it's minus 15 degrees. Well, you may have seen the pictures of empty grocery store shelves making the rounds on social media, many blaming the vaccine mandate being across or blamed on the cross-border truckers. But that doesn't seem to be the case everywhere. Food expert Sylvain Charlebois says there are a number of factors putting pressure on the supply chain, but things are not falling apart because of the truckers.
It's hard to look at one empty shelf and say this has everything to do with vaccine mandates. It's impossible to do. However, because of what's happening right now with supply chains, we are expecting food prices to rise.
Charlebois says shoppers should be able to get everything they need at grocery stores, but maybe not everything they want. City News time, 9:02. Anyone with thoughts on the light rail system in Ottawa encouraged to fill out an application for the public inquiry. The opening of the website is being called a critical step now in this inquiry process. The Commissioner, William Horrigan, says groups or individuals who want to take part are asked to go to the website and fill out an application. There's a link to that site on ours. Go to ottawa.citynews.ca. Now, you have until the end of February to get your application to the inquiry. Justice Horrigan will present a final report by August 31st to the Provincial Ministry of Transportation. Opening up dialogue between Ottawa Police and the general public, the Police Board says it's adopting a round table this year. It will allow community members greater opportunity to express their concern with police board members. A report to the board from one of their committees, Public Affairs and Community Engagement, recommended that move to improve communications. Now, Chair Diane Dean says this is going to be adopted this year. The board also approved the purchase of more than 400 tasers for the force. We'll have more with the board chair, Diane Deans, coming up on the Rob Snow Show in a matter of minutes. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It is Tuesday. It's only Tuesday. I woke up this morning, David, to write some show notes on my computer, and I always save them by the date. And for some reason, it save as, and I started typing out September. September. I had to catch my... Yeah, it's January now. It's January. Yeah, it's been January for 25 days. It's January 25th, 2022. And good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We have a very busy program ahead. Lots of news, lots of views on the news. Coming up, City Councillor, candidate for mayor, Diane Deans, also the chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board. There was a meeting of the Police Services Board yesterday. And Councillor Deans will give us her take on what happened and now what's going to happen and why things are happening the way they are. And we'll get her thoughts on tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's the return of city council meetings. Okay, virtual still, but it is the first city council meeting of the year tomorrow, and our friends at Rogers Television will broadcast that city council meeting live tomorrow, as they always do, if that's your thing. Also on the program this morning, the professor from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, Associate Professor of Management, Professor Ian Lee. He's with us every Tuesday morning with his unique take on the current events of the day. You know, I'll have to get into this truckers convoy, Destination Ottawa. Last I saw, it was rolling through Winnipeg. And it has certainly, it's taken on a life of its own, that's for sure. Rex Murphy, for example, writing in the National Post, says it's a success, if you could call it a success right now, but whatever. It's a success. The reason it's attracted so much attention is because it's become a proxy. It's become a proxy for everyone who feels as though government, and I'm using air quotes here, government, big G government, that government has let them down time and again throughout this pandemic in a whole bunch of ways. And it's manifesting itself in this trucker protest. A lot of people are living vicariously through the trucker protest. Gosh, it's raised $4 million, like close to $4 million. It might even be more than $4 million by now. That's what the organizers raised through GoFundMe. Gosh, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money for a protest. It's a lot of money for a GoFundMe campaign, any GoFundMe campaign. I was trying to recall a Canadian GoFundMe campaign that has raised that kind of money, probably not since the fundraiser that was held in the aftermath of the Humboldt Broncos tragedy. It's about the only one I can think of. And there's a report this morning that the organizer might have a difficult time in accessing that money from GoFundMe because they want to know where the money's going. And is it really going to cover the things they say they're going to cover, the cost for food, fuel, lodging for the truckers in this convoy? The organizer says, of course it is, and it's not a big deal, but no matter. They're still many days away from Eastern Ontario and the capital city. But what's it all about? That's what we're going to ask the professor. What, in his opinion, does this convoy represent? I'm more interested, to tell you the truth, in talking about the economy. I mean, this is a big week for the Canadian economy. This is the week that the Bank of Canada could finally stop talking about the possibility of raising interest rates and actually raise interest rates. Not by much, 25 basis points. But the thing is, the signal that the ultra cheap money, those days are over. With the economist consensus being it's just the start. And with inflation readings like the ones we have seen of late, the central bank will have no choice but to keep raising interest rates, maybe raise them 3 more times this year. After it raises rates tomorrow, if indeed it raises rates tomorrow, it's not a certainty it'll raise rates tomorrow by 25 basis points. And the same sort of announcement looms for the most important central bank of them all, the U.S. Federal Reserve. I expect some news on rates tomorrow from the U.S. Federal Reserve. And I mean, you see what it's doing to markets. All of this talk about inflation and higher interest rates, and you throw into the mix a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. It sent the markets on a wild ride yesterday. We had poor Peter Fraser on the program yesterday from Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities, and I said, Peter, you see the stock market's down 1,000 points. 1,000 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1,000 points at noon yesterday, and by 4 o'clock, totally reversed course and closed higher. Because, of course it would, right? Of course it would. Oh, it's better than closing 1,000 points lower, I'll give you that. Anyway, it looks like it's going to be another wild day today. This is the kind of volatility that we had during the financial crisis. That's why it's freaking out a lot of people. It's what's known to some, they call it a taper tantrum. That if there's even a hint that the Fed is going to raise interest rates, the steam goes out of stocks and the traders have a tantrum. It's called a taper tantrum. But we'll talk about all of that. Who knows what else? I mean, it is Professor Ian Lee, after all. Could go off in all directions. We'll talk about food. The price of food, shortages of food, the food supply chain. We have an expert on that from MUU, the University of Guelph. Professor Mike von Massow, Associate Professor in the Department of Food. Okay, it's officially known as the School of Food, Agriculture, and Resource Economics at the University of Guelph. You want to know about food in Canada? Ask the academics at the University of Guelph. Okay, they're the best in the country. We have this silly thing happening on Twitter now. Some twits are taking pictures and they're putting them on Twitter. Fully stocked grocery store shelves. See, no shortages. The conservatives are making it up, and I've just proven it because I was at one grocery store. And I took this picture with my iPhone and I put it on social media. Other twits are taking pictures, putting them on Twitter, showing empty shelves and saying, see, massive shortages. We're all going to starve. Thanks, Trudeau. Way to go, Trudeau. I mean, this is where we are in the pandemic now. This is the tribalism of the food supply chain. The professor says, we chatted this morning, the professor says it's all a bit simplistic. The food supply chain is very complicated at the best of times. These are not, look around, ask your friends. These are not the best of times. So that's coming up. Syndicated columnist Michael Taube, my friend from the right side of things. We have been watching together and talking a lot on this show with great interest. The self-immolation of Boris Johnson as UK Prime Minister. More developments there this morning. A real Marie Antoinette moment now for him. Let them eat cake moment. Birthday cake, birthday party at the Prime Minister's residence. Oh, looky here. Again, during a lockdown. When the rest of the country can only have 2 people indoors, there's the Prime Minister at his birthday. They have a picture of him holding the cake, for crying out loud. He's having a birthday party with 30 people during a lockdown. That stench in the British air is hypocrisy. And we'll do the Talk Back Hour coming up between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's an hour of opinions. It's an hour of phone calls. It's always an adventure. It's the hottest hour of talk radio in town. We have the ratings to prove it. And today, concerns. What concerns you? I ask because there have been news reports recently that the pandemic isn't the number one concern for people anymore. It's not anymore. It has been replaced by the rising cost of living, paying for the basics, food, and fuel. So I want to know more with your help on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise. And people, and for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was like thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in a mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors, or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy, because we have to shut down completely, you know. And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say T-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit, but when come to clothing. Like, it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend. Doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
City Councillor Diane Deans is on the Rob Snow Show this morning on City News, also chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board and a candidate for mayor in the municipal election later this year. Good morning, Councillor Deans.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Hope all is well.
All is well.
That's good. That's good.
Busy. We had a busy police board meeting yesterday, so all busy.
So if somebody wants to come before the police board because they have concerns or are interested in the way the police service is operating, but they find that the current setup or makeup of the police board is not conducive to them having input. This has been a complaint recently. What is being done to resolve that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. After the Black Lives Matter issue and some local protests here in Ottawa, we started having a lot more people attending our monthly board meetings and wanting to interact with the board. Yeah. Our rules of procedure currently allow someone to come and speak not only to an item on the agenda, but also any item relating to police that within our mandate that they want to talk about, which is actually quite permissive compared to what happens over at City Council. If it's not on the agenda, you don't speak about it. But that has been ongoing, but the community feels that they want to have more of a dialogue, and they want to be able to question the board members and interact in such a manner. Well, we meet once a month. These are our business meetings, and we do have business of the board to conduct. So it has been very challenging to try and meet the community in the middle on this. So we hired a group called PACE that has made some recommendations, and their primary recommendation is to start what they call a deliberative roundtable, which would not be in the context of the board meeting, but would have a board member sit on the deliberative roundtable and would be just that, an opportunity to discuss the current issues of the day, maybe one issue per meeting, and to have a facilitator and a much more in-depth, grounded discussion about those issues. So that is what the board is looking to do now. They passed that in principle yesterday at the board meeting, sent it over to our Policy and Governance Committee, of which I'm the chair, and we will try and put some meat on those bones. So we will try and figure out how we would do that, who would facilitate it, do we need a secretariat to work on this, and what it ultimately would look like. But we will test this out and see if this better meets the requests and concerns from the community.
Okay. There was a report issued based on interviews with 116 Ottawa Police Service members, and it concluded that the workplace situation at the Ottawa Police Service requires urgent and immediate action on things like workplace sexual violence and harassment.
Yeah.
And findings included descriptions of harassment, mistreatment, unequal career opportunities by female interviewees, reports from racialized interviewees who felt excluded from Ottawa Police Service culture. So what is being done with that report? What will be done in light of that report?
So this is work that has been ongoing for quite some time. We're aware of the pervasive culture, not only inside Ottawa, but police, but in broader Canadian society of misogyny and differences for people. And so we really take this seriously. We have been working on this since 2020. There is a lot of work that has already started inside police. Yesterday we saw the final report and 18 recommendations. We have accepted all 18 recommendations. And now the hard work of implementing culture change inside an organization that has a pervasive culture, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time, but there has to be a real will, and you have to continue to drive this every single day. And we are very committed to doing that. I personally believe that everyone has a right to a workplace that's free of, sexual violence and assault, that is safe for the people that work there and has equal opportunity at its very core. And we're going to start the year one investment is $2.2 million. It will go into a lot of training modules, and we're going to hire a psychologist on staff to assist people that need help with that. Yesterday we heard from Aaron Lee from Octiva, who suggested that it would be beneficial to the Ottawa Police Service to have a conversation with community-based feminist groups that would bring a special expertise. So we will do that. So we will work on a lot of fronts to try and change that very pervasive culture that exists today.
Okay. Why is the Ottawa Police Service spending $1.8 million on tasers?
Well, Tasers are part of the toolkit that we currently use. And last year they came forward and they asked for cartridges, and I think it was $200,000 they were asking for. Yeah. And at the time, we were hearing a lot from the community saying that tasers don't reduce harm and that we should consider them. So we have hired a group out of Toronto called Strategy Core, who is doing for the board a use of force review. So, ultimately, it would be nice if we didn't have to make purchase of new tasers until that work was completed. But the reality, Rob, is that 650 of the tasers expire and will be taken out of service at the end of the year. And with supply chain issues the way they are, if we don't order them now, we won't have them. Okay. And so it was never really about deciding at this point, prior to the use of force review, whether we would use tasers or not. So it was a bit of a challenging question for the board yesterday, because on one hand, you'd like to do the work before you commit to something that's going to last another 5 years. On the other hand, with supply chain issues, you don't really have a choice. So the board decided to go ahead and make sure that we continue using them. And, we've seen coroner's inquests that have recommended the use of tasers as a de-escalation tool. And so we don't have prevailing evidence at this point to say that tasers are not a useful tool to police, and that's why the board approved the expenditure.
So first city council meeting tomorrow. Back at it tomorrow. What's big? What's big tomorrow?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's a fairly light agenda. I know I have the motion regarding Bill 21. Okay. And you will recall the issue with our neighbors in Chelsea, the grade 3 teacher who was taken out of the classroom.
Know it quite well. Yeah,
for wearing a hijab. So the city of Brampton actually started, as you know, the federal government has provided no support to the court challenge, the Supreme Court challenge around Bill 21 and the issues that go along with it. And so the city of Brampton has called on other municipalities to offer up to $100,000 in funding to fund a legal challenge on this. So I'm going to be sponsoring that motion at council tomorrow along with my colleague Wilson King. I think the fundamental issue here is people should not be forced to make the choice between their religion, their identity, and their profession. And they really need to have the money to have a court challenge. And so I'll be asking City Council if they would be willing to consider a donation to that court challenge.
Okay. We'll be watching it with great interest. Thank you so much, Councillor Deans, for your time this morning.
Rob.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Councillor Diane Deans, City Councillor, candidate for mayor, chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board. The news next on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now at Ottawa, minus 15 degrees. Some scattered light snow around as well. Smiths Falls, minus 14. Here's what's making news this hour. 400 more tasers approved for Ottawa police officers during their board meeting last night. That board also approving a bigger voice for people in Ottawa. A roundtable will be introduced this year at the Police Services Board. So that gives people more than just a 5-minute window to address an issue with the force. That was the allotment of time at a board hearing if you were granted an appearance. The inquiry into the LRT problems opened up with a website for people who would like to contribute to the process. Now, you have until the end of February. Anyone interested can apply. You fill out an application at their website. You can find a link at ottawa.citynews.ca. That inquiry is scheduled to report to the province by the end of August. Ukraine's leadership is seeking to reassure the people of that country a feared invasion from neighboring Russia is not imminent. The comments come today even as Ukrainian leaders acknowledge the threat is real, and they're prepared to accept a shipment of American military equipment in order to shore up their defenses. City News Time at 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, he's back with us. The poor professor from the glebe, where the streets are paved with gold and lined with money trees.
No, right now the streets are paved with snowbanks. Huge, honking snowbank.
Oh, come on. They're taking the snow away. They're taking the snow away. I see it all over the city. The crews are taking it away.
Down my street and the streets around me, I'm in the back end, the poor end of the glebe, the working class, the proletarian end of the glebe, but you can only drive down one car at a time. 2 cars cannot pass. If you meet, one car has to pull into somebody's laneway or back up to the cross street. And I'm talking Homewood and around there. It's very, very bad.
Well, you're probably not paying enough property tax.
Yeah, $10,000 a year is what I pay, and I guess it's not enough, and I don't get anything else. And by the way...
What do you mean you don't get anything else? What do you mean you don't get anything else? What do you mean by that? You don't get anything else?
Well, what do I get? Tell me.
You get clean water?
No, I'm paying separately for the water bill.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep. I pay separately for my hydro bill, hydro, too.
Hydro. Okay, you've complained about the roads. You have complained about the sidewalks.
Yeah, and they don't replenish the roads. They do the bicycle paths, but I'm not biking in the winter.
Okay, yeah.
So that's out.
Street lamps. You have street lamps. You have street lamps. You have street lamps.
Yeah, we have. That's true. The city of Ottawa brings in over $4 billion.
They do pick up the garbage. They pick up the garbage and the recycling.
And now they want to limit it and actually charge.
I bet you have some nice parks around there. I bet you have some nice parks around.
No, well, they turned it into a shopping center. Remember?
Oh, that wasn't a park. That was a parking lot. Speaking of which, I don't want to get too sidetracked because we have a lot of big issues. But I rarely drive through the glebe. But unfortunately, because of my lovely wife, I had to drive through the glebe the other day. She was looking for a pair of cross-country skis. So we wound up at a ski shop in the glebe. I won't say the name of the business. But needless to say, what strikes me with the glebe, and it always has, given how progressive, left-wing, everything that it is how heavily trafficked it is. Like both sides of the street, there's never a parking spot to be found. This sports store that we went to, actually, it was very convenient because it has its own parking lot right next to the store. Yeah. So free parking, very nice, very, very nice perk in such a heavily trafficked area as the glebe. It's the same thing in Westboro. It's the same. It's
people won't come. I mean, it's congested from people that are here and nearby. It's not congested because large numbers are coming in from Canada or Barrhaven or Orleans, and so it's consequently we won't keep going on about this, but it is very difficult to move around in the glebe, and it is. I mean, it's very, very, very congested.
Yeah. Okay. So. The Freedom Convoy. Convoy. Massive convoy of truckers headed to Ottawa. As you well know, they are opposed to vaccine mandates, especially the vaccine mandate for cross-border truck drivers. Rex Murphy suggests in the National Post this morning it's a proxy. for a whole host of other grievances. I would like to know how you view this convoy. How do you view it?
It's I'm surprised that nobody has connected the dots on this, at least that I've seen in the public discourse in the last, couple of weeks. We had Aboriginal groups and environmental groups shutting down the railroads about a year and a half ago, and the government was falling all over itself, our national government in Ottawa, Mr. Trudeau's government, basically justifying it. Now, they weren't coming right out and saying rah, 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 but they were certainly making it very clear, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, let's kind of let it burn itself out.
Yeah, we kind of support them. They have the right to protest, after all, and is what the argument was. I did not support whatsoever those shutdowns. I don't support any shutdowns by any interest group or any protester, because now we're starting to inflict harm on ordinary Canadians. The infrastructure is how we move goods and services, because people are services, right? We move goods and services across the country using our infrastructure, whether it's airports, airlines, railroads, or highways. And the problem is, and so I don't support this. At the same time, I understand their frustration and the double standard. That is to say, when privileged progressives put on a protest, say, let's shut down a pipeline, the government and and decision makers and many journalists say, ooh, isn't this wonderful? It's democracy in action, and we mustn't get in their way. They have their right to do that. But if a group that does not meet with their approval, truck drivers, for God's sake, they drive big trucks, and they're not sophisticated people that live in the Glebe or in the town of Mount Royal or in Rosedale in Toronto. If they protest, then all hell breaks loose. And again, it's this, I'm talking about this privileged position that privileged progressives invoke, that their positions are morally superior, so they get a pass. They can go, as Mr. Guilbeault did 20 years ago, engaged in a house invasion of Premier Ralph Klein and invaded his home. I call that a criminal code offense. They went into his property against their they did not seek their approval and started to put in solar panels on the roof. And people said, they're protesting because there's a climate crisis. Don't you understand? In other words, they rationalize their own bad behavior, illegal behavior sometimes. And then if somebody else adopts similar practices, protest practices, all hell breaks loose. And it's because of this idea that, there's two standards. There's one standard of rules, one standard of justice for privileged progressives, and another standard for everybody else. So, while I do not agree with the truckers using the infrastructure to protest,
right,
I understand why they're doing it. They're saying if Guilbeault can do it, and those causes that the Liberal government agrees with can do it, why can't we? Mr. Trudeau, can you answer that question?
Right. So you're opposed to them. You're opposed to them holding up traffic, blocking highways.
Whether they're tractors, whether they're cars, or whether they're environmental groups, or Aboriginal groups, or trucker groups, we should not allow the infrastructure, because there are millions and millions of Canadians who depend on those trucks, which deliver, I believe, 90%. You've seen different figures in the media. I've got a figure of 90%. Of all domestic stuff in Canada is moved by trucks. The trucking industry moves 90% of all the stuff. So we're the second biggest country, longest country, biggest country in the world. 8,000 kilometers across. And we've got one lousy little highway called the Trans-Canada, which often is only one lane each way. So the last thing we need to do is to throw more barriers in front of it, no matter what the group
vaccine mandate for those truck drivers, do you think that's wise?
I've already argued that, the argument for closing it down at the border, saying if you don't have two vaccinated, you're not double vaccinated, is because you're going to risk bringing COVID into the country, the current variant. Well, come on, people. We're not that stupid. We already know it's in the country. We see the numbers every night on the news. They're scamming us. The government is feeding us snake oil. They're saying we're doing this for public safety to stop COVID from coming to the country. News alert, Mr. Trudeau. It is in the country. Watch the news every night of the number of infections and hospitalizations. It has arrived. It is here.
Yeah.
Stopping truckers at the border is not going to do anything whatsoever except stop goods called food coming into our grocery stores.
Right. So, okay, got you there. So let's move along. If I said to you, how are you feeling about the economy? What would you say? Are you bullish or bearish? Optimistic or pessimistic? What's your feeling?
I'm going to, because I suspect you're going in the other direction, I'm going to maybe surprise you, maybe surprise some others. I don't want to say I'm jumping up and down for joy saying, whoopee, whoopee, I love being locked down. I'm not. But if you ask me big picture, long term, I mean, I'm very, I'm optimistic for the future. I really am. Now, I'm talking Canada and the United States. I'm not talking the world. I mean, I think that there's some horrors going on in this world, starting with the thug, the murderer, who is called the president of Russia. That's his name is Putin, by the way. And then we've got this authoritarian in China. And so there are some serious problems in the world. There are some deeply confused people in Europe, running Europe, starting with the German government and playing footsie and being very cozy with the thug that's running the Russia. But in North America, you look at whether it's our GDP growth rate, our long-term outlook for the economy. We have a highly educated workforce in both countries, and we have longevity. We have all kinds of good things going for us. And so, yes, the pandemic has been very unpleasant. Yes, tragically, some people died. But I compare things to the big picture. This is a walk in the park. Sorry, everybody, but it's a walk in the park compared to the Spanish flu of 1818 to 1920, when somewhere between 50 and 100 million people died. Not 800,000 like in the States, 50 to 100 million. And, we're living now to 80s and 90s. At the turn of the century, 100 years ago, that century, the 1900s, the average life expectancy was around 40. 45. I'm statistically dead compared to a person in the 1800s. I shouldn't be alive, and yet we're all alive. We live much longer. We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, by the way. The OECD data shows that. We're fifth largest, contrary to interest groups telling you that, poverty is skyrocketing and we're all falling over the cliff into abject poverty. It's simply not true. Poverty has declined to the lowest level ever in the history of our country, and that's StatsCan.
Yeah. I was talking to a very sophisticated investor this week who, very bearish, very bearish on the outlook, that interest rates are going much higher, that inflation is baked in and is going to be around, that growth will be sluggish, and it's going to be, his words, it's going to be 10 years of economic pain, is what he said.
I won't dispute that, Rob. I won't dispute that.
And I'll tell you, we see how volatile the markets are. They're as volatile as at any time they've been since the financial crisis, which was not fun. And you have the Jeremy Grantham letter. Jeremy Grantham is a legendary hedge fund manager out of Boston who says we're in a super bubble. Yeah. It's not just everything is inflated. Not my words. He says, stocks, bonds, townhomes in Orleans that are costing $800,000, $900,000, right?
Absolutely.
And he says we're in the late stage of a bubble. I'm going to quote right from his letter, where he says we have the touchy-feely characteristics of crazy investor behavior. In the last 2.5 years, there can surely be no doubt that we have seen crazy investor behavior in spades, even more so than in 2000, the bursting of the tech bubble, especially in meme stocks, EV-related stocks like Tesla, cryptocurrencies, and NFTs.
But Rob, this is going to sound really paradoxical or bizarre.
It's going to be
maybe.
tough. Tough times are ahead.
This is what I call the disease of affluence. And people say, what? The disease of affluence? We've got...
Affluenza. It's called affluenza.
No, we are so wealthy. collectively.
Yeah.
We are so wealthy. We literally, look, we've got $1/3 of $1 trillion sitting in bank accounts we can't even spend right now. I'm not kidding you. I mean, the growth, when people faint and journalists faint because we owe $2.5 trillion of debt, and people say, oh my God, we're doomed. We have $2.5 trillion of debt. What they never tell you is we've got pushing $17 trillion of gross wealth. Our net worth is over $15 trillion, and I'm not talking corporations and governments. I'm talking we the people. Average net worth individually, $400,000 a person. Okay, young people aren't worth that because older people are worth way more than $400,000. There's incredible affluence in Canada and the United States everywhere, and so these asset bubbles are people with a lot of money trying to look for new opportunities somewhere else to invest their wealth. We are not. We're the absolute antithesis of Somalia and Ethiopia. They're at one end of the continuum of human misery. We're at the other end of the continuum of extraordinary wealth and success.
Okay. When we come back, we'll talk about, I want your thoughts on whether this is the most tumultuous period in your life. I mean, you've been around longer than I have. I was just thinking yesterday, my gosh, the stock market is down 1,000 points. We've got a massive protest that's on its way to Ottawa. Pandemic rages on. Inflation, could be a war. How many crises can we have all at the same time? But I want to ask you about that. Professor Ian Lee, when we come back, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
Keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back with Professor Ian Lee, Associate Professor of Management at the Sprott School at Carleton University. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 600 points to start the morning. By the way, it was down 1,000 points at noon, and then it closed higher at 4 o'clock. That's how volatile the market is right now. And it's been a rough beginning to the year. Dow down about 8% for the year so far, and it's only 3.5 weeks into the year. But nevertheless, it was a heck of a year last year. On my list of just under the heading tumult, Professor, okay, I have disease, inflation, war, protest, inequality. I wonder if these are the most tumultuous times of my life. And I may very well say, yes, this is the most tumultuous period in time of my life, of a man of 50 years old. Now, you're older than me. How old are you? You told me once before. I can't remember.
I'm 68. Actually, what am I saying? I just turned 69. Yeah.
69. Okay.
Rob,
all right.
no, we're not. Not even remotely close.
Not even remotely close.
Let me give you a couple of quick examples.
Hey, what year were you born then? What year were you born?
1953. The year Joseph Stalin fortunately died.
Okay.
And the year that Queen Elizabeth was crowned as queen.
Yes.
Coronated. Interesting year. Not even close to tumultuous. I can remember the late 60s when people every day, thousands, and there were race riots across the United States. Okay, we're not the States, but it was on the news every night.
Like 67, 68, 69, though. Yeah, there were people
Cities on fire.
Cities on
people
fire.
People were getting killed at the Rolling Stones concert at Altamont.
Yeah.
And every day people were chanting, and thousands of people across the U.S., hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?
Yeah.
That was on the news every night.
Yeah.
I lived through the 70s. Inflation, we're getting panicking at it's up to 4.7. What a joke. In the 70s, it went from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9. It peaked over 14%.
Yeah.
Interest rates peaked at 20.
Yeah.
Right now, interest rates are 1/4 of 1%.
0.25. Yeah.
My mother, I remember when I was a kid, very young, I'm talking 5 or 6, she used to freak out about things like smallpox and polio. And the moment a vaccine came out, she must have been stomping on top of people to get her kids in to get those vaccines, because in those days it would kill you. You know, there were a lot of diseases, and, child mortality has collapsed.
Yes.
Only in the last 50 years, mostly because of vaccines. Sorry about that, people that don't like vaccines, but this is a reality. And of course, increased hygiene, and of course, increased affluence and public health care. My father's father died at the age of 35 from a kidney infection that could have been treated, very routine medicine available. But as my father told me, my late father and my late mother, who grew up in Saskatchewan in the Depression, there was no unemployment insurance if you lost your job. There was no welfare. There was no public health care.
Had to pay the doctor, right? You had to pay the doctor, right, Professor? Pay the doctor.
You paid the doctor, and if you didn't have money, you either begged the doctor to treat you and give you credit, or you didn't get treatment.
Right. Okay.
And so now today, we're sitting around in unbelievable affluence. Listen, I tell my students this, they think I'm nuts, okay?
Yeah.
I did my undergraduate degree. I started my undergraduate degree, okay, using a pen on a piece of paper. And then partway through, no kidding, my parents gave me a very small portable electric typewriter.
Wow.
And then I did my master's degree on this a miracle called a Commodore 64.
Wow.
So I've gone from pen and paper to typewriter to computer to all in the space of 35 or 40 years. I mean, I've flown all over the world. You couldn't do that 40 years ago. Boeing, people don't remember this. Rob, one more quick one. And I use this every year in my classes. For anybody who's ever sat in my class, they'll recognize it. In 1962, the only people that flew in airplanes were presidents and prime ministers and billionaires. If you went to Europe, as we did, because my father was a pilot in the armed forces, you went to Halifax and got on a ship, and you went across on the ocean. I don't remember going across to Germany in 1955, but I remember coming back. and everybody had their head in the toilet, throwing up for 7 days because you're going across the North Atlantic. The waves are 50 to 100 meters high, and everybody is sick as a dog. Boeing came along in 1962. Now, we're not talking a million years ago, 1962, and invented the world's first wide-body jet and said, hey, we can fly you to Europe in 10 hours instead of going across the ocean for 7 days in a boat where you've got your head in a toilet throwing up.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I call this progress.
I remember being at the airport in Sydney, Nova Scotia with my grandmother one time. We were going to fly to Halifax, and it was early in the morning, and she was lamenting because people were there, and some of them were there. They were still wearing their pajamas. Some people were wearing jeans, shorts, flip-flops, whatever. It was the summertime. But she was lamenting that people didn't get dressed up when they got on the airplane, anyway, because going on the airplane used to be such a special occasion. Something you would get dressed up to go on the airplane.
I'm going to give you one more quick anecdote, and these are not trivial because they talk about our very well-being, a standard of life. I tell my students one of the biggest inventions of the last 100 years was the Sony Walkman, and they look at me like I'm from planet Pluto. I said, what are you talking about? I said, listen, until this Sony Walkman, we had to play our music in the basement on a record player. Sure. You couldn't carry the record player to the beach because there was no such thing as portable music. And along came the Sony Walkman, and music became portable. You could take it to the beach with your girlfriend. This was revolutionary. And now today we walk around with a little thing in our ear that I can barely find because it's smaller than my fingernail.
So,
you know what I mean?
Despite all my gripes about disease, inflation, war, and protest, we're lucky to be living in the times we're living.
We are. I can remember my first 5 or 6 cars had no air conditioning. I didn't even know what that was. I had Standard. I grew up on Standard, and I tell that to young people, and they don't even know what a Standard automobile is.
They don't make Standards anymore. But
they don't make them anymore. I mean, the change in the last 50 years has been unbelievable. I remember my parents.
But it's not, things change. But my question is, tumult. Are these the most tumultuous times of year?
Well, inflation.
And you're saying
versus 14.
Yeah, and you're saying no. Yeah, but it's interesting. The late '60s.
I mean,
incredible time.
I think in Canada now, if you're talking other parts of the world, sure, I'm not going to get into a debate over conditions in some of these countries that are just hellholes. I'm talking Canada and the United States, and I've traveled over both countries, and I've been all over Europe too. And I mean, the increase in the standard of living and the quality of life for everybody has just been unbelievable.
Okay.
And healthcare and treatment of women that have high-risk pregnancies. And of course, women have been liberated. I have a graph showing fertility from StatsCan, 1900 to 2020, and it goes along at about 4.5 for most of the years until 1962. And then all of a sudden, it just collapses. So I tell my students, what happened in 1962? And they look at me because they don't know what 1962 was. I said, the world's first birth control pill came to market. It did, by the way. Yeah. Okay. And it liberated women.
Sure. Okay.
It did. It liberated them from being the tyranny of being
cheer up, Snow. Cheer up. It's not as bad as you think it is. Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Life is good.
Life is good, especially in the glebe. The streets are paved with gold and lined with money trees. If only you could see them. If only you could see them beyond the snowbanks. Okay, we'll run. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, here every Tuesday. That's why. Talkback Hour up next. What are you concerned about? That and so much more at 750-1310. Rob Snow Show on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, some scattered snow flurries and minus 15 degrees. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Supreme Court challenge to Quebec's Bill 21 could be partially funded by Ottawa City Council. Brampton has asked cities to contribute to a legal challenge to the law in Quebec that prevents people in positions of authority who work for the province from wearing religious symbols. Diane Deans tells the Rob Snow Show it's an important issue.
I'm going to be sponsoring that motion at Council tomorrow along with my colleague Wilson King. I think the fundamental issue here is people should not be forced to make the choice between their religion, their identity, and their profession.
Nadine says money is needed for the court challenge at the top court in the land, so she will ask for a donation from City Council tomorrow. City News time, 10:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Cloudy for the afternoon, turning colder. The high just minus 11, a gusty northwest wind. Tonight, mainly clear and cold, will drop to minus 27, but it'll feel like minus 38 with the wind. For today, the high, minus 11.
And right now in Ottawa with some scattered snow, it's minus 15 degrees, minus 14 in Smiths Falls. GoFundMe has now frozen the $4.2 million raised over the past 11 days by organizers of the anti-vaccine mandate trucker convoy. The freezing comes until it receives documentation about the distribution of that cash. What's known as a Freedom Convoy is headed to the capital from BC. Secretary of the Western Separatist Maverick Party launched the GoFundMe. It states money will go to accommodation, food, and fuel for those taking part. Canada is following the States and the United Kingdom, telling families of diplomats to leave Ukraine amid the rising tension with Russia over a possible invasion. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
A day after our allies, multiple reports say Global Affairs Canada is now asking the spouses and children of Canadian diplomats serving at our embassy and consulate in the country to leave Ukraine. The government is also advising against any non-essential travel to Ukraine and tells those already in the country for leisure to leave as soon as they can due to the rising threat of a Russian invasion and an armed conflict. Meanwhile, the U.S. has more than 8,000 troops in a state of readiness to help NATO allies in Europe, and NATO has ordered more warships and fighter jets to the region as a deterrent. The West continues to push towards a diplomatic solution, and tomorrow, Ukrainian and Russian officials will have talks in Paris. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Actually working from home, obviously. Groups representing the country's paramedics are calling for some improved mental health services as staff shortages and unprecedented call volumes are taking a toll on workers. Here's City News reporter Catherine Jeté.
The Paramedic Association of Canada says ambulance services are dealing with more calls and fewer staff amid the pandemic and the overdose crisis. In Ontario, a survey by the Canadian Union of Public Employees conducted in the fall found 92% of paramedics said their workload was hurting their mental and physical health. And the latest data available out of BC is from 2020, but it shows mental health concerns were a factor in almost half of paramedics' long-term disability claims that year. I'm Catherine Jeté.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So we're going to try something a little bit different this morning. Kind of have gone down this road before, but not for a while. We're going to see how the conversation goes. So if you call into the Talkback Hour today, and the call-in line you just heard there, 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I want you to complete this sentence. Okay? Like fill in the blank, okay? And the sentence is, right now, my biggest concern is yada, yada, yada. Fill in the blank, okay? Right now, my biggest concern is finish the sentence, complete the sentence. What would you say? Okay. It's not like there are any wrong answers. You know, your concerns are your concerns. Who am I to say otherwise? Just finish the sentence, fill in the blank. My biggest concern is, okay, right now my biggest concern is. What would you say? what would you say? 750-1310, 750-1310. I mean, it could be anything. I was hoping we can keep it on the, a little on the more serious side. My biggest concern is, not like, my biggest concern is there any leftover pizza in the fridge? It's I can see how that could be a concern, but, your biggest concern, but it could go off in all directions. That has been known to happen during this particular hour of radio programming. This hour is always an adventure. You just never know what's going to happen when you press that button and put the caller on the air. Right now, my biggest concern is what? What? Is it the pandemic? Is it COVID? Is it COVID? Is it even COVID related? Is your answer going to be something like, right now, my biggest concern is I'm going to test positive and I'm going to miss work. Right now, my biggest concern is I don't know what's happening with my child's school. I wish my school was more transparent. Right now, my biggest concern is catching COVID and ending up in the hospital. Right now, my biggest concern is, my parents, my mom, my dad. They're in a long-term care home, and the conditions are terrible because of outbreaks. Yeah. Is it pandemic-related? Does your biggest concern have anything to do with the pandemic? Or is it nothing to do with the pandemic? Maybe you're concerned about something entirely different altogether. I'm just wondering what that is. Right now, my biggest concern is, and you finished the sentence, 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. I'll tell you why I wanted to get into this with you this morning. Find out what's concerning you these days. Because there have been some news stories recently that have suggested that inflation and the rising cost of living, that is replacing the pandemic as the number one concern for most people. A couple of weeks ago, there was a poll by the Associated Press, Nork Center for Public Affairs Research, and it suggested that the pandemic, worrying about the pandemic, it's receding. And it's being replaced. The priority concern for people is the economy now. It's being replaced by the economy. Inflation, the rising cost of living, what that does to personal finances. The Associated Press worded the question this way. It's public affairs research partner, Nork Center, University of Chicago. The question was, which problems would you like the government to work on in 2022? And last year, more than half said COVID. Like, if the government's going to try and fix anything, try and get a handle on COVID. That was last year. But this year, much different result. Now it's all about the economy. And it's not even close. Which problems would you like the government to work on in 2022? And the economy, cited by 68% of people surveyed. The pandemic dropped from 53% down to 37%. That's a change of 16 points. And the top 5 concerns, issues that Americans were telling the Associated Press pollster that they wanted the government to work on, were the economy, number 1, not even close, then COVID, then immigration. It's American, okay? Immigration. Then healthcare, and then politics. You want to fix something? Fix your politics. American survey done by an American news organization. Would our results be any different? That's why I'm doing this, because I'm trying to find out. And that's why I want you to finish the sentence. Right now, my biggest concern is... Finish the sentence for me. Finish the sentence for me. Eric in South Keys. Morning, Eric.
Good morning.
So I'm good. Right now, my biggest concern is... What does Eric say?
My biggest concern would be the fact that, the government is saying so-and-so, we have so-and-so deaths related to COVID, but we don't know which strain that is actually coming from. Is it Omicron? Is it, whichever one it was? Is it Delta? And they're not making that clear to us. I haven't been able to find anything, and I think it'd be an interesting point to start. Is it a scare tactic? Is it, they want to keep control? I'm fully vaxxed. I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything like that, but that, to me, is one of the biggest things that scares me. Is it worries me that we don't know.
The lack of transparency, clarity in COVID data.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
All right, Eric. Thank you. Got us going. You got us going there. Is it Joan Orleans? Joan?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Joan. Right now, my biggest concern is
Rob,
yes.
Well, I'll be brief. Right now, I have a bit of concern about Canada.
Okay.
Canada's in a deficit, I believe, a deficit position economically, money-wise. Anyway, my bit of concern right now is Canada lending $120 million to Ukraine. That is fine. That is fine in a way, because that in a way that tells me that Ukraine is already paid back the loan of $500 million they got between 2012, 2014. That's great. That means they've paid back the loan, the millions of dollars they got about a decade ago. Fine and dandy. That is it. Have a nice morning.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joan. Thank you. Okay. I really want us to focus today. Okay. Yesterday we were all over the place. Very frustrating hour. Right now, my biggest concern is, and just finish that sentence for me, okay? 750-1310, 750-1310. Matt in Ottawa. Matt.
Yes, hi, Rob. Thanks for taking my call.
Right now, my biggest concern is, how do you finish that sentence?
It is the truck convoy that's rolling into Ottawa. I think it's being misrepresented in the media.
Okay.
It's not just about anti-vaxxers, in my opinion. It's kind of anti-lockdown, anti-government, anti-I've been left behind, anti-I can't afford a house anymore, anti-I'm paying $6.49 for leeks in the grocery store. I think things this is what the politicians are not getting. And there seems to be a disconnect between the elite politicians and the people. And I'm not saying it's going to be Trumpism 2.0, but it's that kind of groundswell that I think people aren't getting. And I think
the disconnect. There's a disconnect.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect.
And I'm very worried.
Yeah, that's what Rex Murphy is saying in the Post. Yeah. That's what Rex Murphy is saying in the Post, that it's become a proxy protest, that it's come to represent a whole host of grievances for people who feel that the government is letting them down in one way or another. And you've listed, half a dozen ways the government is letting people down. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I work in the public. I've been working every single day in this pandemic for no pay increase. Everyone's when everything shut down and everyone was afraid, people were still working. And where are those people now? The same freaking place. Meanwhile, everyone else is sitting there getting rich during the pandemic. Probably 20% of Canadians are better off during this pandemic. And I'm not a communist or a socialist or anything like that. The fact of the matter is there's a big disconnect between the haves and the have-nots.
Okay. All right, Matt. Thank you. Okay, we're going to stop here, and we'll pick it up on the other side. 1014, Rob Snow Show. Talkback Hour. Your biggest concern. Right now, my biggest concern is, and you finish the sentence, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, Rob Snow Show continues.
Right now, my biggest concern is, and you complete the sentence, just fill in the blank, okay? It's the pandemic. Is it something to do with the pandemic? Did it used to be the pandemic? But, the pandemic, that's so 2021. And now it's something else. And if it's something else, do you mind me asking, is that thing the economy? Is it the cost of living? Is it the price of gas? Is it the price of food? We are not at record high prices for gasoline. We're close, but it's not quite a record. According to our gas price buddy, Dan McTagg, who was on the show yesterday, the gas price guru, record price for Ottawa for regular is $148.9. $148.9. Most gas stations that I see now, I've been here in the station since 6 o'clock this morning, so I don't know if the price went up. But most places I saw around town in the last 24 hours, it was $146.9, so about 2 pennies shy of a record. But that's a backbreaker, okay, for some people because of how fast it has happened. Like gas prices, for some people, are a major budget item. Up 40%, 50% in a year. That's a hard blow for a lot of household budgets. And I mean, the price of food, a big news story right now and a big political issue. But let's take this call here. Anne in Ottawa. Good morning, Anne.
Hi.
Hi,
well,
Anne.
a couple of the things that I'm most worried about have already been...
I want you to finish the sentence.
Okay.
My biggest concern is...
Okay. The trucker strike, because...
Trucker strike.
We cannot get fresh fruit and vegetables if it's not coming from the U.S. I got news for you folks. So unless you want to buy everything in a place like Loblaws, where probably all the truck drivers have to be vaccinated, ain't happening. Okay. So which is going to affect low-income people. So what bothers me the most is how and this is so lost in the conversation, and I would guess the Trudeau government doesn't even want you to think about this, like the worst problem is this, that, or the other thing, but it's not that you're beating to death poor people with all of this. Oh, carbon tax. Yeah, you raise the price of gas, you raise the price of everything. And there are people, just like you just said, that are they get up in the morning and they have to put gas in the vehicle and they want to cry at the price they see because they think, okay, what am I not going to be able to get this week?
Right.
And those people should not
and then they go to the grocery store and they can afford, whatever, $100 worth of groceries, if that, and then they see what $100 gets them and they cry some more.
And
right?
Stuff is going to go up more because there'll be less availability. It's just a blind demand. You know it's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But it's those two things.
All right, yep, thank you. The impacts of the situation with trucking right now. Okay, fair point. 750-1310. My biggest concern right now is Mike, how would you answer that question? How would you fill in the blank, Mike?
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Mike.
My biggest concern is that the mandates, the restrictions, and the government overreach just never goes away and it becomes permanent, and that we never return to a pre-COVID Canada. That's in a nutshell, that's my biggest concern.
We will never get back to normal.
Basically,
to whatever
I
normal
just want to go back to what we were in 2019.
Right.
I just find that just the language that Trudeau is using is extremely divisive, and I find there's just a lot of anger on both extremes, the anti-vaxxers and the people who are extremely pro-mandate. And just there's a lot of... I just feel like there's a lot of bad energy in the air, and I just wish that we would just be more cohesive and go back.
You know, Mike, I'm really glad you called because I really think David and I are sitting here and we're both nodding our head. When you said bad energy, there's a lot of bad energy in the air.
Yeah.
Gosh, I think you really put your finger on something there, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Love the show,
so.
Rob.
Thank you, Mike.
I just wanted to say that the mandates and restrictions, I just hope they're temporary and that they don't stay here forever.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's so well said, what Mike just said. There's a lot of bad energy in the air. My Snow and 60 commentary this morning on Shea 106 was kind of along that theme. I call it the exhausted majority. I remember reading a report. The group was called More in Common, and it coined this term called the exhausted majority and how it's the exhausted majority is like the kind of the 70% of people who don't identify with either extreme on the left or on the right. And this group, more in common, identified, I don't have time to get into it all today. Maybe it'd be a great topic for a future show. The 7 tribes of politics. And at the two extremes, on the left, you have the progressive activist, identified as young, tireless, highly engaged, secular, cosmopolitan, and very angry. Okay, on the left. And then on the right, you have what it identified as the devoted conservative. White, retired, but also highly engaged. Deeply patriotic and uncompromising. And those are the two extremes. And they're sucking up all the airtime, yelling and screaming at each other. And in the middle are most of us. And that's about 70% of any electorate. And that's called the exhausted majority. And we're kind of getting exhausted by what might call the negativity that's in the air right now. I think it's such a great point that he makes. Trevor in Nepean. Good morning, Trevor.
Yes, good morning, Rob.
My biggest concern right now is, how would you answer that question, Trevor?
I'm going to go with overreach of the government.
The overreach of the government. Okay.
And
what are you talking about there?
Just in the sense of how the mandates that we've had to go through over the course of the pandemic, are we ever going to get back to normal? And if something happens again down the road, how they're going to overreach again and like more lockdowns over simple things, even to do with the use of energy in the future. Just the government basically being a part of absolutely everything that we do in our life now.
Right. Okay.
Seems to be the topic about pretty much every conversation when it comes to minor hockey, for instance. It goes right to the top, to the Ontario Hockey Association. Every corner we turn, the government is there to roadblock things. And I just worried about how much more they're going to interfere with us going forward.
Okay. Sounds like there's a story there, Trevor. It sounds like there's a story there with minor hockey. I'm wondering if you
Not
could
so
be...
much. I mean, just as an example, it doesn't seem like there's anything up to the grassroots of things anymore. It's got to go all the way back to...
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
One of those deals, you know?
All right. Okay.
That type of stuff worries me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Yep. Andrew in Merrickville. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm okay. Right now, my biggest concern is, and you finish the sentence.
Right now, my biggest concern is the mental health of my parents. To be honest, it's really concerning. You know, they're in their mid-60s, and my father his whole life worked, 3-4 jobs to be able to make money and take us on vacation. Traveling was a big part of growing up and what my mom and dad loved to do in retirement. And they've had to cancel multiple trips. My father's showing early signs of Alzheimer's, and it's doubled because of the stay-at-home orders. And it's actually terrifying to see how they're kind of deteriorating.
Okay. Yeah.
They just want everything to go back to normal. They abide by the mandates and vaccines. So do I. And it's just sad to see, when they're not allowed to see people and family and things like that. It's really affecting them.
You see it taking the toll when you're over there or whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You do.
The calls, the phone calls, everything like that, the way I talk to them, just confusion, and all they do is sit at home, watch the news, and that's the worst thing they do.
Yeah. Watch the news. Yeah, my dad, watch the news, watch the sport. I've seen my father once in 2 years. Can you believe that? Once in 2 years.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And same with my wife and her family, once in 2 years, right? Once in 2 years.
Yeah. And I, at one point, it was when they were saying that he couldn't see my nephews, right? My brother's kids. My father actually at one point said, if they're going to not let me see my grandkids, I'd rather die. because that's all he cares about is seeing his family and spending time with these young kids right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. All the best, sir. All the best to your parents, too. The last three callers during the course of our conversation, all three of them have said, I'm worried that we're never going to get back to normal. It's a variation of we're never going to see normal again, or it's not going to go back to normal again, or when are we ever going to get back to normal? A variation along that. Very interesting. Okay. It's coming up to 10:30, halftime talkback hour. Pick it up right on the other side. Speaking of mental health, my gosh, the survey that was recently released by Angus Reid, very doomy gloomy on the situation with Canada mental health. You know, a nation depressed. We'll talk about that too. This is City News.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with some scattered snow in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, -14, feeling like -20 in the wind. Here's what's making news this hour. 2 Ottawa councillors will bring a motion tomorrow during the first meeting of the year. Diane Deans and Ralston King will ask for a donation from the city to fund the Supreme Court legal challenge to Quebec's Bill 21. It bans some from wearing religious symbols at work. The daily provincial stats on COVID show 4,008 people right now in hospital. 626 of them are in ICUs. Now, the case count today has dropped to 3,424. Of the new cases, 218 are in Ottawa, 44 in Eastern Ontario, 30 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 8 new cases in Renfrew. All quite dramatic drops from yesterday. There have also been 64 more deaths recorded from COVID in our province. Canada is telling diplomats to leave, at least the families of diplomats, to leave Ukraine. Tensions between that country and Russia are increasing, and following the lead from both the United States and the United Kingdom, Canada now telling family members to leave as soon as possible. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Right now, my biggest concern is, how do you finish that sentence? How would you finish that sentence? How would you fill in the blank? How would you fill in the blank? Is it still pandemic related? That was the most popular response last year to survey questions about this, but apparently, according to news reports, that is receding, and concerns are being superseded. Concerns about the pandemic being superseded by economic issues, like the price of food. Big news story, big political issue. You know, my social media feeds are, filled with people yelling at each other on Twitter about whether store shelves are empty or full. At their local grocery store. Someone goes to their local grocery store, snaps a picture, fully stocked, everything's fine, nothing to see here. And then someone else goes into a different grocery store in a different neighborhood in a different city or a different province and snaps a picture of some empty store shelves, and we're off to the Twitter wars. It's really, really ridiculous to watch. There are shortages. No, there are no shortages. Yes, there are. No, there aren't. You're spreading misinformation. I'm reporting you. No, you're spreading misinformation, and I'm reporting you. It's like, you know what it is, David? It's the online grown-up version of recess is what it is. And some people insist on they're going to run to the teacher and play tattletale. That's what it is. These people on Twitter, gas prices, food, housing affordability. This would all fall under the big umbrella, that issue called the economy. Is that the biggest worry right now, say, over and above the pandemic? More so than the pandemic. Right now, my biggest concern is, how would you finish that sentence? How would you finish that sentence? Mike in Gloucester. Mike, good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you, Rob, for taking my call.
Yeah.
My biggest concern today is coming up with another $20 so I can pay my car insurance today. I am living on $972 a month on ODSB. My buddy is waiting for his doctor to finalize his ODSB. He has to wait 90 days. Now, I bought 2 donuts and a slice of pizza. That's what I lived on for 2 days last week. By the time my ODSB comes in on Monday, I owe most of it on rent, my car insurance, and I have maybe $100 to last the month. I go to bed every night.
What kind of car do you have? What kind of car do you have, Mike?
An old Mustang that I do not drive in the winter very much unless the streets are dry because I cannot afford snow tires, so I stay at home. Okay.
Yeah.
My shoulders are all my joints are in my body. My shoulders, my elbows from working construction. I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years. Okay. And people don't care about people on ODSB. They don't care about people on social assistance. Now, I worked all my life. I'm 62 years old. I could not get even a family doctor. They laughed at me when I tried to get a family doctor when I was going through the process of getting on ODSB. Plus, being left out of society, you want to talk about being left out of society? People can't afford, on ODSB, can't afford an Apple iPhone or whatever it is.
Internet.
You cannot collect rewards. You cannot talk to anyone in government unless you have a computer or a cell phone. There's a whole segment of society.
Do you have a cell phone, Mike? Mike, do you have a cell phone?
No. Can't afford it.
No computer at home?
No computer.
No internet or anything like that?
No internet. And people like me, I go to McDonald's to eat, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have an iPhone to collect rewards points. So they're giving free food to people who can afford an iPhone, and I have the same thing at Tim Hortons. I got over 5,000 points over the last 3 years on my Tim Hortons card, and I can't cash it in for any rewards because I do not own a cell phone. Now, you're talking about a whole segment of society that's been left out. I go to bed every night hoping I wake up dead, and I thank God I'll be 90 in 30 years and I'll be dead.
Okay, Mike.
Trudeau.
Yeah, let's not talk. No, let's not talk like that, Mike. Mike, $972 a month. Okay.
Yes.
How much is your rent, if you don't mind me?
I rent a room $300 a month.
But it's just a room.
Just a room.
Right. Okay.
I live with my buddy. His mom died early January 2 years ago. We all had COVID before it was COVID. Okay. I know that.
How much is your insurance for your car?
It's $81 a month.
81. Okay. All right. That's pretty cheap.
And I have a perfect driving record.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right, Mike. Thank you.
Okay.
Good luck, sir.
And like I said, 30 years from now, I guarantee you there'll be a Trudeau 3, and God help Canada if there is a Trudeau 3.
Okay, all right. I don't know about that. $972 a month, $11,664 a year. $11,664 a year to live on in Ottawa. And you think you have it tough. Goodness gracious me. Vince in Nepean. Vince, good morning. Hi, Vince.
Hi, Rob. Great show this morning.
Thank you. My biggest concern is, complete the sentence.
The pandemic, because it's affecting everything in our everyday lives, from grocery stores to restaurants to jobs to school, et cetera, et cetera. So I really can't see anything getting better.
Still to this day, okay. Still to this day. Interesting that it's still the pandemic, over and above everything else, still the pandemic.
It's affecting everything. Now we're starting to see in the grocery stores, and that's because of the pandemic and the truckers and all that. It's all related to pandemic.
Yeah, it's hard to separate all of this, right? Because inflation is caused by the pandemic economy in part, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hospitals, doctors, everything.
Yeah. Okay, Vince. Thank you, Vince. Thank you. Yeah. What I find interesting, tomorrow is Bank of Canada Day. That's going to be a big focus for us tomorrow, whether the bank is going to raise interest rates by 25 basis points. But it's the first in what could be a series of rate hikes. But something that I find interesting, and once again, it comes back to this public opinion research. This time it's Nanos for Bloomberg News. Rising cost of living. These kind of motherhood apple pie pocketbook issues for politicians, interest rates. When Nanos goes into the field and polls Canadians, it's not interest rates that are a big concern for Canadians. Nanos says Canadians are more concerned about the cost of everyday items, food and gas. And you know what? It's not even close. It's not even close. Nanos asks, what are you more worried about? The price of the basics or the prospect of higher interest rates? 9 out of 10 say it's gas and food that I'm worried about. I'm worried a lot more about the price of gas and food than I am about an interest rate hike. Interesting. But again, finish the sentence. Complete the sentence, okay? Right now, my biggest concern is... And Ron is in Barrhaven. Ron, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
My biggest concern is actually, I was going to say just Justin Trudeau, but I'm going to have to say all governments.
Okay.
They've bundled this whole thing from the get-go. We shouldn't be in these straits. Truckers shouldn't be stopped from crossing the border or with this nonsense. I'm just at wit's end with all this stuff. And Rob, may I ask you a question?
You may. Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Ron. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yesterday you said that 77% of all Canadians are vaccinated?
Yes, that's from the Globe and Mail website. Yeah.
Right. And so that means they have 3 shots.
Well, it depends on what your definition of fully vaccinated is.
But do we have a full definition? I thought in Quebec you have to have 3 for their vax pass to work.
In Quebec, you do need 3. Yes, I believe you need 3 to be considered fully vaccinated. There are calls this morning from the Liberal leader to make it 3. The New Democratic leader and the NDP leader in Ontario says it should be 3. It's not right now in Ontario. It's 2, right? It's
I know.
Yeah. I mean, fully vaccinated, it just says on the Globe and Mail website, because they're keeping track of this stuff every day, right? And it just says 77% of the population is fully vaccinated. So, and it doesn't even say what that means. Does that mean the entire population, all 38.5 million of us? Because there are people who can't get vaccinated,
No, I know.
Like people between the age of 1 and 4 they're not getting vaccinated, right?
No. Thankfully, no.
Yeah. So, whether it's whatever your opinion is on that, I don't want to get into. But what are the parameters of this? What does that mean? What does fully vaccinated mean? What does of the population mean? Sure. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Now, so once again, my biggest concern is what are they going to do next to screw things up? That's my big concern.
Okay. What are they going to do next? Okay. Well, let's not give them any ideas, Ron. So let's end it there. Let's go to Beverly. Beverly in Ottawa. Beverly.
Hi.
Hi,
my
Beverly.
biggest worry. Hi. My biggest worry is mental health for myself, my family, and for a lot of people.
And why is that? Why is that?
For me personally, we have some big decisions to make. My mother lives with us. She's 84, so it's time now for her to go into a nursing home. That's very stressful and worrisome.
Yes, that is stressful,
My husband's a teacher but can't get a job. We worry because he's just bouncing around at every school every day.
Oh, I see.
So we worry about
doing
COVID.
supply teaching. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And then we just worry about the mental health. Like your callers have been saying, social media is really ramping up the hate messages and the bad vibes, and that's really stressful. It's very, very stressful. And I really want to send a hug out to that Mike caller. Boy, that guy has it a lot tougher than me. I almost hung up because I thought, wow, I guess my
You're going to sound like a whiner, right? We're going to sound like whiners, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
$972. I'm just curious, and I don't want to pry, but I've heard this complaint about young teachers. I'm assuming your husband is a young teacher. Hard to break into getting that full-time gig, right?
That is correct.
Teaching job. So
And
how long has your husband been a teacher?
since 2018.
Since 2018. Okay. 5 years
right.
now. Almost 5 years, right?
He was able to get a long-term contract last year, which was fantastic, but then he missed getting on that list by 2 weeks. But the way they returned everybody to school, I think, was a bit of a problem as well, because they're sending these teachers to various schools instead of picking them into.
Have you
one
ever
or two.
considered moving? Would it be easier if you moved to get
once we decide on my mom, yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So then we would be, my sister lives in Vancouver, and she said there's lots of jobs there. But also we're looking at Northern Ontario. Maybe
Northern
some
Ontario,
of the indigenous, some of the indigenous reservations up there.
Right.
We think we can make a difference there. So perhaps.
Okay. All right. Interesting. No, but mental health. Your biggest concern is mental health.
Yeah, I find I cry more. I find I listen to the news, or I'm on Facebook, and I'm crying more than I normally am. So, I
you're
heard
preaching
about
to the converted there, Beverly. You're preaching to the converted. Yeah.
Okay, well, I heard about Ukraine, and I had tears flowing. I don't know anybody in Ukraine. I just feel for those people, and I have a lot of empathy.
You know what? There's a lot, that's a big Canadian story. There's a huge Canadian angle to that. There are 1.4 million people in Canada of Ukrainian heritage. This is a big deal for a lot of people in Canada. They're watching it with great interest. And Chrystia Freeland is, Ukrainian as well, right? So, all right, it's worth watching.
Thank you.
Look, thank you, Beverly. Thank you for being so open and honest there. It's greatly appreciated. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about mental health, burnout, stress, all of that stuff. Happy, joy. What is your biggest concern today? Rob Snow Show, City News.
So the birth of Absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, happily, where Allium is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. So I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been Absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's been the big democratic sweep of, like, in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is like we went down to 2 employees from 25. and we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's, little steps. So it's been tough. It's, I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here, because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about like the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of like pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and all and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now all of a sudden, all 4 of us. 6 soon. But we'll be doing some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of like the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, and you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
So I've been asking people to complete this sentence. Right now, my biggest concern is, is it the pandemic? Is it, COVID-related, testing positive, and what that could mean, catching COVID, what that could mean, COVID in the classroom, what that might mean. Is it COVID-related at all? Is it something else, like the bank account, like inflation, the basics, food and gas? Is it mental health? Previous caller said mental health, burnout, stress. I feel your pain, on burnout, on stress, trying to keep it together, maintain good mental health. Not easy to do the longer this goes on. And again, Angus Reid, my gosh, David, Angus Reid had just scary poll results. I mean, almost a quarter of the nation says it's depressed. Yeah, that's not healthy.
Somehow it just doesn't surprise me that much.
That is not good for the individual or the collective, right? Nope. It's not good for the Borg, not good for the country, right?
Bad sign.
The report was called Pandemic Fatigue. 1 in 3 Canadians report struggles with mental health. 23% say they're depressed. 23%. 23%. Angus Reid asks, when thinking about how you feel personally about your mental health with the COVID-19 pandemic, how would you say you're feeling? 36% say they're struggling. Way up, by the way, just since November. What happened in November? End of November, Omicron. Bam, right? Flattened everyone like a pancake. 48% say, I feel fatigued. 40% feel anxious. Almost 40% feel anxious. And 7% said they are, quote, barely getting by with their mental health. Barely getting by. A third of us can say we know someone close to us who has seen a therapist in the last year. A third of us. Do you know somebody who's seen a therapist in the last year?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Many people.
Many people, yeah.
Not uncommon.
Half say they know someone who drinks too much. Well, who are you looking at? Who are you looking at me? And a third say they know someone who does drugs too much. So, a pretty downbeat picture of the population. 23% of the population is depressed. 7% I'm barely getting by. Man, oh man, oh man. I'm going to need therapy right after this. Helen, Westboro. Helen.
Hi there.
My biggest concern right now is
gas.
Gas prices. Okay.
Yeah. And also running out of gas to cope with this pandemic.
Running out of gas, yeah.
But yes, the price of gas. No, I don't drive. I don't have a car.
Okay. So why is that a big concern for you?
Because it affects the price of everything.
Oh, I see. Okay. Right.
And the availability of everything with truckers strike. One thing that just occurred to me while I was waiting is food. Everybody's talking about food, and I went to the grocery store walking yesterday in the cold, and there were empty shelves. Okay.
There were. Okay.
Yeah, there were.
Okay. Yeah.
There were some, whatever. There were empty shelves. But the other thing I'm thinking about is medicine.
Medicine. Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. How are we going to get those things?
Yes.
And when I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
That's okay, Elle.
And I'm not depressed. I don't know how come, but luckily for me, I love the news. I'm a news freak.
Okay.
So there's enough news going on.
And that still gives you your sunny disposition, even though you watch so much news.
A sunny disposition? I think, I don't know if it's sunny, it might be funny.
All right.
Yeah, I watch the news and I sort of analyze it and I sort of give my response, but TV doesn't respond.
Okay. All right, Helen. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. I'm just going to move along. I'm very busy here this morning. I should talk less. Robert, Ottawa. Robert. Good morning, Robert.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, Robert.
Morning.
Biggest concern is, what is it?
As a young person who's trying to get in the housing market, it's housing prices.
Housing prices, okay. Yeah,
It's just bleak thinking about the fact that, you know, as a young person that's been trying to save since they were in their teens. And,
right. How old are you now?
I'm 25.
25. Okay. All right.
And I've been saving for years, and I know plenty of other people who've been saving for years. And it's just, you know, to try and get a house in Ottawa or that's somewhat not in the middle of the countryside, it just doesn't seem possible.
No, bleak, I think, describes it, right? Yeah.
And, you know, it's upsetting because, like, you know, our parents were, like, able to go and find affordable housing, and like once you get like a mortgage and you start having equity under you feel like you have some financial security, and that doesn't seem possible as a young person anymore.
Right. Okay, Robert. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not surprised from a young person that's the number one concern. David, Ottawa South. David.
Yes, Rob.
Yeah, hi, David. Number one concern is...
It's depressing. It's everything about the economy, the supply chain. I don't pay full price for anything. I buy my lettuce when it's on...
on sale?
It's last legs. It's on sale. So instead of paying $3.29 for a head of lettuce, I'm paying $1.50.
Right, but it's kind of limpy at that point.
No, you peel off the first two layers of limp, and the rest of it gets you by.
Okay.
You know, you might throw a little bit, but you're certainly better off.
You're buying lettuce when it's ready to be like instantly made into cabbage rolls by the sounds of things.
No, it's not that bad, really. But I have to shop very, very carefully. The price of gas, I mean, it's costing more gas in the gas trucks to get gas to the damn gas station. How does that sound?
Yeah. Okay. All right, David. Thank you. Yeah. I do quite like cabbage rolls. I haven't had a good cabbage roll in a long time. My wife is at the grocery store, I think, as we speak right now. I wonder if they have ready-made cabbage rolls there. Darlene in Nepean. Good morning, Darlene.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Darlene. Biggest concern is...
COVID-19 pandemic.
The pandemic, yeah, of course.
And the first thing I thought of, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Yeah, well said, darling.
And, you know, right from the beginning, there has been no political leadership. I mean, from all levels of government. They have left decisions up to the poor clerks, in the restaurants when they were open, you know, to face angry customers, those that have forged, vaccine passports, and there are many of them. And I just think you have to look at everything in two-sided way now. Like when you think of the truck convoy, my first was, no, this is wrong, but because they're not vaccinated. But what's worse, to have people end up starving? Because I do see, and I saw on the weekend in one of the major chains, there's items not there, or they're spaced out to look like there's a front row but nothing behind it. And it's just so sad, and okay. I would think, I like Angus Reid. I read, you know, their polls, and I would think the depression rate, the health rate, just the physical rate of people not seeking treatment is much higher.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point, Darlene. Yeah. Well, on healthcare, we've talked about mental health this morning, but I mean, there's also, the procedure delays, there's lack of family physicians, there's wait times to see specialists, there's, as Darlene mentioned, the cost of medications, acute healthcare problems, things like that. Do you have time for one more? One more. Okay, we'll have to make it quick, like 30 seconds or less. My biggest concern is Ken, Blackburn Hamlet. Ken.
Hi. My concern today is with the Russians lining up along the Ukraine border.
Yeah.
The Chinese are also lined up to take Taiwan. Now, maybe I'm being alarmist there, but is there a timing between the two?
Yeah, not for me to say, not for me to know, but you say you're an alarmist, but both of those developments are alarming, right? With China, they just did a fly past of Taiwan again with like 35, 36 fighter jets just the other day. Like just buzzed right through them, Imagine if one of our enemy states just, flew past the CN Tower with 36, fighter jets. What would we think, right? Probably be shaking in our boots a little bit. You bet. Yeah.
It would certainly split the West.
Yeah. All right, Ken. Yeah, gotcha. Thank you. Okay, we'll see what happens. Boy, oh boy, thank you. Very enlightening hour and really interesting. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. Different topic. Talkback hour at 750-1310 every morning here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, an extreme cold warning just issued by Environment Canada for Ottawa, mainly for tonight and into tomorrow. Minus 14 degrees at the moment. Same temperature in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. As tensions mount over Russia's military buildup in Ukraine, family members of diplomats from Canada in that country are being told to leave. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney joins us with more.
The official statement is now out from Global Affairs, which says given the Russian military buildup in the region and the destabilizing activities in and around Ukraine, the government is temporarily withdrawing children of diplomats under 18 as well as family members accompanying them. Sources tell me family members who don't fall into this category, like a spouse with no kids, are being asked to leave but not ordered. Canada is also advising against any non-essential travel to Ukraine, and the feds are telling any Canadians there for leisure to leave as soon as they can. While the West is pushing for a diplomatic solution to this standoff, and France is hosting talks tomorrow between Russian and Ukrainian officials, NATO and allies are preparing for the worst. NATO is sending warships and fighter jets to the region, while the U.S. has put more than 8,000 troops in a state of readiness. Experts doubt the West will directly engage in a military conflict, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hasn't ruled anything out after repeated questions. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, the Pentagon is placing 8,500 American troops on heightened alert for possible rapid deployment to back NATO allies in Eastern Europe and the Baltics. Former U.S. Marine pilot Colonel Steve Ganyard says the Biden administration is walking a very fine line, but doesn't want to further provoke Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Everything Putin is doing is trying to ramp up the military pressure to get both the U.S. and NATO to blink, to give in to his demands. We see that he's pushing very hard to install a puppet government in Kiev, which would be his ultimate goal. If he wasn't going to invade, then he would want to be able to at least have control of the border state of Ukraine.
Now, Russia denies it is planning an invasion. It says Western accusations merely a cover for NATO's only planned provocation. City News Time 11:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Cloudy for the afternoon, turning colder. The high just -11, a gusty northwest wind. Tonight, mainly clear and cold. Will drop to -27, but it'll feel like -38 with the wind. For today, the high -11.
And now under an extreme cold warning in the region in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's -14 degrees. City News Time 11:04. The daily provincial stats on COVID show 4,008 people in hospital, a hike from yesterday, 626 of them in ICUs across the province. The case count today has dropped to 3,424. This is new cases of COVID. Of them, 218 are in Ottawa, 44 in Eastern Ontario, 30 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 8 new cases in Renfrew. The province is also reporting another 64 more deaths from COVID-19. A Supreme Court challenge to Quebec's Bill 21 could be partially funded by Ottawa City Council. Brampton has asked other cities to contribute to a legal challenge to that law in Quebec that prevents people in positions of authority who work for the province from wearing religious symbols. Diane Dean tells the Rob Snow Show it's an important issue.
I'm going to be sponsoring that motion at Council tomorrow along with my colleague Roslyn King. I think the fundamental issue here is people should not be forced to make the choice between their religion, their identity, and their profession.
Now, Dean says the money is needed for the court challenge, so she is going to ask for a donation from City Council tomorrow. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Hey, Michael Taube is back, syndicated columnist. You read him in the National Post, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. Good morning, Michael Taube.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good. You're all dug out from the storm of last week?
Yeah, mostly dug out from the storm. Good. We got a few extra centimeters yesterday. I don't know if you got it also in Ottawa, but other than that, we're mostly out. I mean, around my road, Jesus, there's so many snow mounds. It's ridiculous. But other than that,
that's the challenge now, is to take it all away, right? So,
yeah, and they won't. In this city, like they will in Ottawa, because I remember when I lived there, they do it. It takes a little while, but they get to it. Here, they just let it melt.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just saw a few news items. Torontonians upset with snow removal. 8 days and I'm still snowed in. So.
Exactly. All they do is complain in the city, unfortunately.
Oh, I don't think you have a monopoly on that, but nevertheless.
No, we don't, but it's pretty heavy here.
Okay. Truckers Convoy. Freedom Convoy 2022. So the Prime Minister is... steadfast in defending the necessity of his vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers. Aaron O'Toole in the crosshairs, as he always is as the opposition leader. Dodgy in defending the truckers' convoy. Won't come right out and say, I think they're doing the right thing. I'll go and see them when they arrive in Ottawa. Won't say anything like that. The organizer has raised more than, last time we checked, which was at about 9 o'clock this morning, $4.2 million. $4.2 million. Incredible. So, in your opinion, what is represented by this convoy?
Well, look, the Freedom Convoy is obviously based on the frustration of a lot of truckers who are trying to make a living and are trying to move the goods back and forth, the goods and services that we need, so that, for example, our supermarkets are supplied, convenience stores are supplied, etc. So we have access to food that we need on a daily basis, or simply other types of food just for the heck of it. We understand what the whole reason is behind this, and I understand, obviously, the Freedom Convoy's frustration with it. And look, as I think I've said it to you, and I apologize if I haven't. I've certainly mentioned it to others. I'm not in favor of mandatory vaccination. The only profession where I see the argument for it is healthcare services, simply because they're the ones giving us the vaccine. So if there was going to be mandatory vaccination, that to me makes the most sense. Everything else, it's a bit dodgy, the whole argument. I think it's actually dodgy in this case, too. However, you're quite right. Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, is pretty strong in his position. He has directly said that truckers should have mandatory vaccines. And Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative leader and the opposition leader in the House, has been asked now several times what his position is. And, he's sort of walking a bit on eggshells on this, realizing that he has one toe of his caucus and party supporters, volunteers, etc., in the actual camp with the truckers and with the Freedom Convoy, and others who unfortunately are sort of in the middle of things or can't really make a decision one way or the other. The problem is, as opposition leader, Mr. O'Toole has to make a call.
All right, all right. Let's listen to Aaron O'Toole. Let's listen to Aaron O'Toole and how he's not making that call right now. This is what he was saying yesterday.
To the Canadian Truckers Alliance, Glenn, for several months. We've seen a crisis in the supply chain coming for several months, and we've proposed policies to try and help alleviate that. The most important of which is vaccines. And we encourage everyone to get vaccinated and to get boosted. And how can we use those tools alongside the other tools to make sure that we don't see shortages on grocery store shelves? Because here's the reality. When there's a shortage of products, the costs go up. And Canadians are already 60% worried about paying their grocery bill. So we can't have policies that make that even worse, and we can't raise taxes. So that's what we've been advocating for responsibly the last few months, Glenn, is to try and tackle the supply chain crisis.
So that was part of a news conference yesterday. Sorry, Michael. Go ahead, Michael. Yep.
Yeah, no problem. No, I think that actually gives a lot of credence to the discussion in general. And look, I mean, obviously, Mr. O'Toole's position about vaccines and booster shots is the same as it's been the whole way through. He started off that he's encouraged people to have, get their vaccines, to get the booster shot, but he's never wanted to make it mandatory. And by and large, most Canadian Conservatives do not believe in mandatory vaccinations. There are some who do, but most of us don't. For that reason, it becomes a difficult balancing act to take a position on this issue, especially when you know that, with problems with the supply chain and whatnot, people are going to have difficulty to get access to food that they need on a daily basis. Some supermarkets and some cities and some towns, some villages are perfectly fine, but we've also seen photos on, social media, within the newspapers, on TV, etc., which have shown that there are heavy shortages in some communities and, virtually no stock of certain things in others. It's a real problem, but in the end, ultimately, just to roll back to the start of it, Mr. O'Toole has to make a position. And the position of being that, I encourage this, I realize there's a problem here, we know that there's an issue with the supply chain, but I'm not going to take a strong position one way or the other. On the Freedom Convoy, he doesn't have to necessarily follow Andrew Shearsley, his predecessor, who actually did come out, and your listeners can see it on social media. He actually came out very strongly in support of the truckers. If Mr. O'Toole doesn't want to do that, that's perfectly fine. But he's got to create a more defined position. It can't just be, I'm going to circle around the question over and over again until people stop asking it of me, because this is a question that's not going to go away. At some point, he has to make a much stronger either defense or rejection of the position, take it, and move forward.
Okay, all right. It'll be interesting to see when that rolls into Eastern Ontario. Yep. Wonder what it'll look like when they go through the news media capital of the universe, Toronto, if they roll through Toronto. So that'll should be quite the scene.
We'll get the Canadian Army. Yeah. That'll help us.
Okay.
God.
Okay. All right. Speaking of God help us, God help UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. My gosh, he's had his Marie Antoinette moment now officially. Okay. Let them eat cake. He is accused. Look, I don't know how many. This number 10. They just call it in the UK number 10. Number 10 Downing. It's like a party place. It's a party palace place. Yeah, I don't know how many parties they've had there. He is accused of having his birthday party during a lockdown, which is a major no-no for a politician. At this time, indoor gatherings were limited to 2 people, but, quote, about 30 guests sang and ate Union Jack cake during an indoor celebration organized by the Prime Minister's wife. And he is once again, I think this is the 3rd week in a row, something involving this Prime Minister has been on the cover of every major UK daily, both tabloid and broadsheet. And, it's never flattering coverage for him. He will once again be in the House of Commons tomorrow for the Prime Minister's questions, which is always entertaining. I'll have to be watching that. That's 7 o'clock our time for anybody who's interested. It's 7 o'clock our time. You can watch the webcast of that, and you'll see a very sullen Boris Johnson. The UK Prime Minister, but for how long, I ask Michael Taube again this week.
And sadly, you'll probably ask me a few more weeks as well, because I think this is going to go on for a bit. But, yeah, look, on the one hand, just from an ideological position or a partisan position, poor Boris. But on the other hand, he's the maker of his own fate. He left himself wide open to these things. He didn't need to have these various booze parties. And, well, certainly, look, no one is going to say that he couldn't have a nice private birthday bash when things start to get better and things start to improve. But doing it then, especially when the limitations in the UK, as you correctly said, were down to 2 people for a gathering, I'm sorry, it's flagrant. And because of that, it's just making him look worse and worse. And, you and I talked last week where they brought up an example recently and you just saw him shaking his head and he was completely horrified. And I think that was a natural reaction because he just realizes that the narrative has gotten away from him and he can't reclaim it. Well, this is even worse. And look, for many of us who have celebrated COVID birthdays, as we all have, in fairly quiet circumstances, we can sympathize with the fact that he wanted something more grandiose, but it's wrong. If everyone else has to basically control themselves, contain themselves, and have smaller gatherings, even if it's just intimate with your own family and maybe 1 or 2 other people, that's the way it should be. And that's the problem, and that's why Johnson, unfortunately, cannot recontrol the narrative, because he's done everything is sort of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of outlook. On the one hand, he says, this is what we have to do. Here are the rules. Here's what occurred. And look, I understand because I almost died from COVID. I recognize the concern, the fear, et cetera, and we need to do this to get back to normal. But then in private, if all he's doing is holding these parties and doing things that in pre-COVID times, would have been perfectly fine and no one would have said anything, that's the juxtaposition. And he's got to, somehow or other, he's got to either get control of the narrative or it's going to be harder and harder for him to stay in power. I still believe, as I did last week very quickly, that he will be able to hang on, but he is losing control rapidly. And if more things come out and other layers to the story evolve, he could be in big trouble.
Yeah. Oh, if only Bristleboard could stop evil, Canadian politicians would they would be heaven sent, let me tell you. So a lot of politicians right now of the liberal persuasion are being criticized for holding up these signs, these placards, and it says, I stand with Ukraine. And what it reminds me of is back in 2014, the terror group Boko Haram kidnapped a bunch of female school children.
That's right.
Held them hostage, right?
Yep.
And Canadian politicians did the same thing.
That's
they
right.
Were holding. They were.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
They were holding up these placards that said, "Bring back our girls." Hashtag bring back our girls.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's not that everybody agrees with the sentiment. I stand with Ukraine. Bring back our girls. But it's like, okay, you're in a position of leadership. Okay. This is literally the least you could do. Like, this is the very, very, like, what is the least possible thing I can do?
You're right.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. If I'm Harjit Sajat, this is the very least I can do. Like, it's so, you know what? It's unserious. It looks like a government that's just unserious. What do you think, Mike?
I'm with you completely. I think you actually exemplified it very nicely and explained the case very nicely. Good call. Kudos to you for the Boko Haram. I forgot about that instance, but yes, it is a carbon copy to what happened almost 8 years ago. And look, I agree with you. It is silly and unserious, as you said. It really is. And of course, you know, Canadians, whether they be of the liberal persuasion or progressive persuasion or of the conservative persuasion or whichever, we obviously stand with the Ukraine. I mean, there's obviously a few stragglers in Canada who thinks that, that Putin is the most wonderful leader in the world. But generally speaking, most of us are supportive of what the Ukraine is going through. However, you know, flimsy signs and placards, and then, of course, an offer of a loan down the road, which is what the Canadian government has basically done, that's not going to help the Ukraine right now. They need weapons, they need military aid, they need our help, and they need our help now. Because unfortunately, you know, the way things currently stand, and we'll see how the next few days go, while there isn't necessarily a perfect storm brewing that there will be war in that region, it's unfortunately looking more and more like it, just simply because the negotiations that are happening between Putin's Russia with the U.S., Germany, France, and other countries just aren't going very well right now. But again, this whole thing, it's nice to be supportive of the Ukraine, but, you know, saying that you stand with the Ukraine, the sentiment is perfectly fine. I'm with you, Rob. At the same time, it's not enough. It's not even close to enough. And it doesn't show solidarity with the Ukrainians. They need our help, and they need it. They need far more than just little flimsy placards. They really need our help overall, as I said, with military aid, with weapons, with money, with whatever you can give, because that's the only way to basically to defend themselves or help them defend themselves against the Russians if war is declared in that region. And as of right now, it's very iffy what's going to happen over the next few days.
Always love our conversations, Mike. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Rob. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. Back right after this, talking about the stock market. Bring you right up to date where things stand right now. I wonder will there be a 4 o'clock closing bell. We'll talk about it next. City News.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa Mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Just heard Peter's ad on the radio. When Peter was with us yesterday, Peter Fraser from Cardinal Planning, the Dow was down 1,000 points. And that was just before noon. And by the 4 o'clock closing bell in New York, the Dow was actually positive for the session. It erased all of the losses. But I was just looking up some of the year-to-date numbers. Here we are, it's the 25th day of January. The TSX is down a little more than 4% for the year. The Dow is down 7% so far this year. The S&P 500 is down 9.6% so far this year. The NASDAQ is the big loser so far this year. It's early, but it's down 14% so far this year. But remember, 2021 was a rocket of a year. Hans Albrecht is back with us. He's Vice President Horizons ETFs. Morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Well, it's great to hear from you. That was a wild roller coaster of a day yesterday. One day doesn't a market make, but how do you explain the volatility in markets?
Yeah, well, I mean, these volatile days have come a little bit faster and more furiously in the last few weeks or so since we made those market highs. I think people are getting a little bit nervous about the potential for rising rates, and when you combine that with growth that is slowing, we saw the IMF cut global growth forecast due to worries about China and U.S. growth. Combine that with things like inflation as well. And you've got a scenario that is a little bit unsettling to investors. And so, and that's we haven't even spoken about the health implications of these COVID cases surging and whether Omicron is a little milder or not than normal than some of the earlier strains. It's just a mathematical impact on hospitalizations when you get sheer numbers of cases exploding like this. And that's exacerbating labor problems. So, we're having labor issues not only, due to lockdowns that we saw during the pandemic, but more and more people are off sick. That's affecting supply chains that are already strained. And so it's a little bit of a domino effect, Rob. And, it's all started with rate worries. And that's why you're seeing the NASDAQ suffer in particular, because when rates rise, these growth and innovation type companies start to have trouble, as we saw companies like Peloton and Netflix, which are big users of cash, right? We know Netflix uses tons of cash to fuel their growth, to create content and to buy content. Peloton as well, burning through cash to sort of take advantage of the big leg up that they got during the pandemic. These kinds of stocks are getting hit particularly hard during this downturn.
Yeah. Yeah, and Shopify's the Canadian darling, and it's down 30% year to date. Now, if you're in 5 years ago, you're still, you're way ahead of the game, but down 30% year to date, nevertheless. A stock, though, that has returned 1,500% since its IPO. So all things in perspective. Nevertheless, how do you view the possibility, the Bank of Canada is going to make a rate announcement. Everybody's waiting for the Fed as well. The implications of a higher rate environment, Hans.
Yeah, so you and I have talked about how this extreme low rate environment is a little bit on the unnatural side. If you look at sort of where rates should be versus growth historically, we've seen, employment numbers return to pre-pandemic levels in a lot of areas of the U.S. So should we have rates as low as they are right now? And the argument probably says no, that shouldn't be the case. And so there is a certain amount of normalization that we probably need to see play out. Having said that, however, we've seen the Fed try to do this before. And so my feeling is that maybe we see a bit of a repeat of the playbook that we saw in 2016, 17, 18, where the Fed did threaten numerous rate hikes. Markets tantrumed, and the Fed only got away with, I think it was just the one rate hike. So, we're in a different world these days. This isn't your grandfather's rate environment and stock market. We know central banks are mandated to watch things like inflation and employment, but whether we agree with it or not, they're also very concerned about risk assets. They like the wealth effect. They like when consumers feel wealthier, and they do feel wealthier from rising equity markets and homes that have risen as well. And so, they've done well. And the Fed likes that. So it remains to be seen how aggressive, and we call it hawkish, how hawkish will the Fed be? They're certainly hawkish right now, and it's unsettling a lot of people, combined with a lot of other things going on. But will they be able to be as aggressive? A lot of people would say that the Fed has painted its way into a corner. We've created this massive amount of debt in the world to sort of dig our way out of this pandemic and to sort of sustain businesses and industries and folks sitting at home. Can we continue to do that forever? And have we created this situation where, if you raise rates a little bit, it's going to create a lot of pain.
Okay. How do you come up with, say, an investment vehicle, whether that's an ETF or what have you, that can act as some sort of an inflation hedge? Well, I mean, in my view, I think you tend to look back at the tech names that have sort of come off a little bit. Okay. If you're particularly concerned about inflation, you want to own real assets. You might want to own things like gold that tend to do well. The irony of something like Bitcoin is it hasn't done very well. No. In terms, it's sort of moving with markets. It's very much a risk on, risk off type asset. And it's not acting very contrarian. It's not acting as a hedge to inflation. It's not acting as a hedge.
It isn't. Gold is doing a little bit better in that respect. Real estate tends to do well. You sort of real things that you can touch and feel tend to do very well. But in this kind of environment where we are seeing some bubbles pop, right? You and I have talked about these meme stocks. Yeah. We've seen some of those stocks. Robinhood is down 80% from its highs. That was kind of the proxy for what's going on out there with things like GME and AMC and some of the speculative type play things out there. And so we've seen some of that come off as well. But that, for me, that feels like we're kind of nearing the end of perhaps, picking a bottom is very, very different, very, very difficult at any time. So you never want to try to pick tops or bottoms, but it feels like a lot of the fluff has come out of markets, and we start to look again at stocks that are making an impact. A lot of these tech stocks are changing our lives. They're coming up with solutions for problems that we have. Yep. I don't think that goes away.
Creating value, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Hans. Hey, great to catch up. Glad you're well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hans Albrecht, Horizons ETFs on the markets. Again, we'll have all your closing bell numbers right here on City News starting at 4 o'clock. Rob Snow Show, City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, January 25th. Good morning, I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa, it's minus 13, feels like minus 20, and in Smiths Falls, it's minus 11, feels like minus 16. Here's what's making news this hour. Province-wide, there are 4,008 people in hospital with COVID-19, 626 in the ICU. Cases have dropped to 3,424, though. Of the new cases in Ontario, 218 are in Ottawa, 44 in Eastern Ontario, 30 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 8 new cases in Renfrew, and another 64 deaths are being reported as a result of the virus. Canada is following the U.S. and the U.K. in telling the families of diplomats to leave Ukraine amid rising tensions with Russia over a possible invasion. The government is also advising against any non-essential travel to Ukraine and tells those already in the country for leisure to leave as soon as they can due to the rising threat of a Russian invasion and an armed conflict. 2 Ottawa councillors will bring a motion to council tomorrow during the first meeting of the year. Diane Deans and Ralston King will ask for a donation from the city to fund the Supreme Court legal challenge to Quebec's Bill 3212, which bans some from wearing religious symbols at work. City News Time, 11:35. I'm Danielle Bain, and for news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Ottawa City Councillor, Chair of the Ottawa Board of Health, Keith Egli, is back with me here on the Rob Snow Show. Good morning, Councillor Egli. Yeah, really nice to hear from you. I hope you're well these days.
Yeah, not too bad at all, thanks.
So I don't want to go through everything that came up at the Board of Health meeting yesterday. There's a good write-up on our website, ottawa.citynews.ca, but I know that Dr. Etches would really like to get those booster shot numbers up here in Ottawa. And really, if we're going to, advance with, things like restrictions, reopening plans, these sorts of things, that seems to be her biggest concern. Would you agree, Councillor?
Yeah, it's certainly a significant concern. When you look at first and second doses, we're up around 90%, and yet for booster doses, we're at about 59%. So, yeah, the board, Dr. Etches, we'd all like to see that number go up. Vaccinations aren't a complete solution to what's going on, but they certainly are a huge tool in the fight against COVID. And I think part of the discussion last night, Rob, at the board was everybody wants this reopening to be as sustainable as possible. We don't want to have to say to families that schools are closed again. We don't want to have to say to businesses that we need to put restrictions in again. So anything that we can do to make it more viable, more sustainable, we're looking at all those options.
Okay. The board passed a motion asking Dr. Etches to have discussions with provincial health officials about making a third dose part of the vaccine passport. This is something that seems to at least have political momentum behind it. I know here in these pre-election times in the province of Ontario, Councillor Egli, you have opposition leaders like Andrea Horwath, Stephen Del Duca, who are demanding that Doug Ford put this in place. There are provinces like Quebec where it already is in place. 3 doses to use the vaccine passport. Why do you want Dr. Etches to make the third dose a requirement in order to use the vaccine passport?
Well, I mean, what the motion did, it was my motion, actually.
All right. Okay.
What the motion does is it asks to have that conversation, that discussion. It's not a black and white issue. There are good reasons for having a vaccine mandate and passport, and we've seen, for example, normally when that occurs, you see numbers of doses go up, but there's also issues of access for certain individuals, certain communities. So we wanted to have that. Want Dr. Etches to have that discussion with the province and see what the right way forward is, because again, the common consensus last night at board was we want this reopening to be, as I say, to be a sustainable one that we're not rethinking this a month or 6 weeks down the road, but do it cautiously and do it with as much information as we can as to what the right way forward is to make sure that it has some legs.
So I want to get you on the record as the chair of the Board of Health here in this city. Do you think it should take 3 doses to be able to use the vaccine passport, Councillor?
Well, I think I just answered that question, but I'll try again. It's something that we need to discuss. It's something that we have to have that discussion with the province and with Dr. Etches, with her colleagues at the provincial level, and figure out, again, weighing the good and the bad of it, whether that's the way to go. But we need to have that conversation, and we need to make that determination. So I guess my answer to you is, let's figure it out.
Okay. All right. You're kind of hard to nail down there, Councillor, on that. If you're not saying yes.
I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not a doctor.
I know. Neither am I.
So the decision was made to let the doctors and the scientists look at it in a serious way, have that discussion. And part of the motion is for Dr. Etches to report back to us as to what the consensus is.
Yeah, it's not going to be the doctors who, in the end, who make that decision. It's going to be politicians who make that decision.
Hopefully, though, based on good medical evidence and data.
Yeah. I guess my concern would be when does it end? We don't know. We don't know. Maybe it takes 4 doses. Maybe it takes an annual dose. And how comfortable? I don't know how comfortable I am with the idea of having to carry a vaccine passport around that says I'm fully vaccinated all the time. Well, I've had my 4th dose and now I can use the vaccine passport, or I've had my annual dose and now is that where we're headed? Who knows where we're headed?
And I understand that, and that is certainly part of the discussion. But we have to have that discussion, and that's what the motion was meant to do, was to generate that discussion and see what the best way forward is.
Okay. Outside of everything that happened at the public health meeting yesterday, the public health board meeting, the first city council meeting is tomorrow. What's big for you? It's kind of a light agenda, but what's big for you for city council right now? Like a big issue for city council right now with regular meetings, council meetings, committee of the whole meetings, getting back into it, Councillor Eglot?
Yeah, so I mean, as you pointed out earlier, it's election year in the province, it's election year in the city.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of work to do in the first little while of this year, because there's a point where the city clerk's office says, you can't make these decisions anymore. You're in full election mode now, and so there are a number of issues coming up that we're going to be discussing. The Salvation Army site plan is getting ready for another discussion, and as you know, Rob, that was a huge issue at council when the project was first
on Montreal Road. On Montreal Road,
yes,
yeah, okay,
correct.
All right.
So that we'll be dealing with that in the first part of the year. Tomorrow is the Mayor's State of the Union address. It'll be his last one as the mayor, and he will set some ideas for it as to what he would like to see council accomplish over the next number of months. And of course, there's a motion that
Councillor Deans and Councillor Ralston. I spoke with Councillor Deans earlier about Bill 21 and help throw a little money so people can litigate this in the province of Quebec. There are people fighting Bill 21 in the courts in the province of Quebec. They don't have a lot of help, and it's you're going to fight the Quebec government. It's going to be a very expensive exercise. Are you for that? Are you okay with that? The City of Ottawa helping to fund?
I'm not okay with the legislation. I think the legislation has a lot of difficulties with it.
Well, of course, yeah.
And I guess my concern with the motion is it's coming straight to council. And my concern with motions that go straight to council is you don't have an opportunity to hear from the public in the same way as when it goes to committee. People are not given the opportunity, as you know, to come to council, make delegations, set forth their positions, whether they're for or against something. So as a councillor, it makes it difficult to gauge public opinion when you don't have that, and motions are brought on fairly short notice, as this one is. So I'm still pondering that one, quite honestly.
All right.
But it's tough to make those decisions on the fly without the benefit of hearing from your constituency as to what they think of it. It's their money at the end of the day.
Sure thing, Councillor.
I think it's important we do hear from them.
Okay, Councillor Egli, you're always so generous with your time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
Speak
Have a
soon.
good day,
Councillor Keith Egli, Knoxdale Maryvale Ward. City Council meeting tomorrow. You can watch that on Rogers Television tomorrow. This is City News.
When it came to opening the business, because I was so young, there was a lot that I didn't know about management, financial management, management of people, all around management, I think is the word that I always come back to. I think that I always had a passion, and I knew that I wanted to create a space for people to get their hair done, but I had no idea, even having studied business management, what it really took to open a business as well as sustain a successful business. So in 2014, I was actually working with Angela Sutcliffe. She was my business coach at the time, and she was like, what's your niche? Like, what separates you from other salons? And when we started to really dig, it was the curls. It was the fact that we work with all curl types: curly, kinky, wavy, coily, which is how we identify our curl types. And then you have straight hair as well, of course. But you know, more than 70% of the world has some sort of curl pattern to their hair. And we just realized that that was not being addressed. It wasn't something we learned about in school. So that's, I went to the States and I traveled all over to kind of gain the information that I have now to be able to share it with our clients and as well as with other stylists. So in March, when it came, I thought it was gonna last, a week, 2 weeks, I think it started off at 2 weeks. And I was like, cool, I have 2 weeks to just relax, that's fine. So I was actually in a position where I was not happy, so to say, but I was a little bit happy, to be honest, just because of what I was experiencing personally. Now, when that extension started to happen, it was not a great feeling. It was very uncomfortable not knowing how I was going to support myself financially. So I'm so excited about the Academy. It's something that I started, and I launched it during the pandemic. So I've been teaching for a number of years. I've been educating for a number of years. I educated at Algonquin. I've educated at Versailles Hair Academy. And I've also educated in my own space, in this space and my old space up on Greenbank. And so it was just a continuum of what, I've been doing for these years. When we have a client in our chair, it's not just about making your hair look great. It's about how do you go home and take what we've just taught you and emulate that. So now with a world where people want to quote unquote be diverse and inclusive, what does that really look like in a salon setting? And for me, it looks like being able to invite any curl type, any hair type really, because I can take care of straight hair types just as well as, I can take care of curls. And we cater to all curl types regardless of what you look like on the outside, we got you.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Supply chains, food supply chains. Lots of people reporting shortages at their local grocery store, higher prices. There have been warnings that this could persist. So let's get some insight from the experts. Dr. Mike Von Massow is an associate professor in the Department of Food, Agriculture, and Resource Economics at Guelph University, the Ontario Agricultural College Chair in Food Systems Leadership, and he researches supply chain management and food Value Chain Structure and Performance. Hello, Professor.
Good morning.
Well, it sounds like we've reached the perfect person.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
How would you describe right now the supply chain for Canada's food supply?
Well, I think there's two things I would say. The first is that it depends what we're talking about. There are some things for which the supply chain is working quite seamlessly, and for some things, I would say that there has been an accumulation of pressure from a variety of sources. The Omicron outbreak has caused some people to have to isolate and be off work for short periods of time. That's an issue. We've seen ongoing slowdowns in supply chains. We're hearing about disruptions due to vaccine mandates for truckers, and we have to remember we were probably short truckers before this, so this is putting added pressure on. So we're seeing a bunch of individual pressure points that can squeeze the supply chain a little bit, and if they were happening in isolation individually, the system would recover quite well. That's what's causing us some of these price increases, some of these short-term product shortages, made worse by extreme weather. As an example, in British Columbia a few weeks ago and last week in Ontario with large amounts of snow. So the system is working. I think over the last couple of years we've seen incredible resilience in the food supply chain, and we see hiccups when several of these factors all sort of hit at the same time.
Okay. Seamlessly. You don't hear a lot of about things that work seamlessly these days. When it comes to the food supply chain, what is working seamlessly?
Well, we've got lots of products that we haven't had any disruption to. To a degree, it's a factor of luck. In some cases, processing plants have more trouble getting people in, or have short-term outbreaks with Omicron, and then we see short-term shortages of those things. But throughout the pandemic, we've had huge surges in demand for flour. I'm one of those insufferable bread bakers from the pandemic.
I have a cupboard full of the stuff, Professor.
Yeah, after some early shortages due to packaging and dramatic increases in demand, we've seen really very little disruption with flour. Where we're seeing disruption are things that travel longer ways. So this time of year are fresh fruit and vegetables. Some of them have been slower to get here, so we've seen some short-term shortages. And it also depends entirely on what the store was ordering that day. If we have a weather event like the snow event we had last week, if the store was short of one thing, and their order was to come in, and that order was delayed a day because of snow, then that's what would be missing on the shelf that day. So yeah, we don't hear about things, and I think when things are going well, and I think we're more attuned to potential issues because of the discussions around supply chain. If in a normal winter we had a big snowfall like we did last week, and stores were short of a couple things for a day or two, I'm not sure it would have been news. But because we had all of this discussions about supply chain problems, and we've had discussions about trucker vaccine mandates, all of a sudden we're paying more attention. And it's not bad to pay attention to our food system at all. But I think the sky isn't falling, and it's irresponsible to suggest that it is.
Okay. Sky isn't falling, but let's focus, for example, we're in Ottawa. We're supposed to be the destination for this trucker convoy.
Yep.
Could that vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers exacerbate the issues that are already at work causing problems with the food supply chain?
I think there's little doubt that the vaccine mandate for truckers could exacerbate the current situation. As I said, we'd already experienced slowdowns. We'd already had capacity issues. We were already short truckers. What we're doing is taking even more truckers off of certain routes. Now, the question becomes, to what degree can we reshuffle that people who weren't doing international routes can now do international routes? So, again, how much of an impact remains to be seen, but there's no doubt that what we're doing is taking a system that already had reduced capacity and further reducing it.
Okay. There was a report several weeks ago, the Canada's food price report, that predicted a Canadian family of four would pay an extra $966 for food in 2022. Would you expect that on the consumer level to still sort of be the forecast for this year, or just given what's going on right now, could that bill actually be higher? What do you think right now, or is it too soon to say?
Well, I think it's a little bit too soon to say. I was also suggesting that we could experience a food price increase, and that's from a variety of factors. I think if you look at the most recent numbers, we see year-over-year numbers that are close to 5% in food, and so I think there is the potential for it to continue to be high and pressure to continue to exist on food products. One thing to remember is we usually see price increases for food at this time of year because we're importing it. I'm looking out my window here at a blanket of fresh white snow. We're not growing a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables in Canada at this time of year, and so they are coming in. And they're always more expensive at this time of year. Now we see fuel prices go up. We see trucking capacity go down. So we're going to see, for those imported goods, even more price pressure than we probably experienced, than we probably expected. But if you look forward and say, well, when we get into the Canadian product, we'll see some of those prices come back down. But yeah, food price increases are here to stay for this year, I would say.
Okay. You know, there's so much attention just paid on the truckers, because the truckers are all over the news, as you can imagine, as they roll through every city. They're on every supper hour newscast. But I was just writing some notes down about everything that's involved in the food supply chain. Kind of in food lingo, they farm to table. So it's it's a very complex system. I mean, it's the farmer, and in Canada, maybe that involves some imported labor, right? Temporary foreign workers, seasonal workers, and we've had some issues there with COVID. Farmers dealing with higher input costs, as you pointed out. There's food, there's fertilizer, all of these prices are up. Then the raw food has to get to a processor, or whether that's an abattoir or whatever, packaged, then onto a truck, then into a grocery store, then into somebody's house. Something can go wrong along the way at any point there in this supply chain, right?
There are a ton of moving parts in our food system, and when things are going smoothly, we don't pay any attention to them. And then when there are glitches in the system, and there are lots of places, as you highlight, that there could be glitches in the system, we are so accustomed to having the full choice of great food available all the time that when we see glitches in the system, we get concerned. And I think, it's right for us to pay attention, and I think we'll continue to look at ways that we can improve the system. But I'll go back to say, with all of those moving parts and all of the sort of challenges from weather events due to climate change to COVID, to shortages of labor, really the system has shown that it is profoundly resilient and performed really well. It probably is worth many of us to pay a little bit more attention to where our food comes from and develop a better understanding and, frankly, appreciation for the complexity there.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your insight this morning. It was really great to have your insight. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to chatting again.
The Rob Snow Show.
Tune in weekdays starting at 9.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com